Thank you very much, Molly. You've given us even more to think about and perhaps some more tools that we can use. We now come to Joy, who's our last speaker. And Joy says that some of her key skills are public sector procurement, local food marketing, strategic and policy development. She's a former Soil Association team leader for local food projects, and she was instrumental in Food for Life initiative. She works as an independent consultant in sustainable food systems planning, and in 2010 to 11 she researched and wrote a baseline snapshot analysis of the food system that serves Bristol and the city region, called Who Feeds Bristol, which I think some of you will know about. It's certainly a splendid book and I can recommend it. The second part of the title is Towards a Resilient Food Plan, and really that's what we're all trying to achieve. It was commissioned by the National Health Service in Bristol. And this report has led on to developing the Bristol Good Food Plan and public engagement process within the Bristol Food Policy Council. So, we have got something to build on. I think Joy is going to tell us a bit more about that. So, thank you, Joy.
Thank you very much. I'll follow suit and come around here. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit more about, I suppose it's the context in which we're talking about levies and supermarkets, and the context of developing a more resilient food system. So a bit about what I've discovered in the research, something about what is already going on, and then sort of concluding on what we really need to do, and acknowledging from the outset this is a challenge. Nowhere in the UK is there any organisation which is really taking a lead other than the voluntary sector. No one political party is able to grasp the food agenda. It's so huge, it's so complicated, as I discovered. And in doing that report, I've worked in the food arena since the early 90s. And I actually ended up feeling terribly depressed about supermarkets. I thought I knew how bad the situation was, and I actually got really depressed and wondered, well, what's the point in doing this report? But I did manage to come out the other side, because I think there are some good things to talk about. So, the context then. The report is there. I assume probably quite a few of you have seen it. There's a copy here. It's a big fat book, really. But it is an attempt to take an overview at what is our food system. And the reason for doing it was to understand really where the powers are for a city to influence the food system. And we can't understand that unless we understand its components. So there are the 6 main components there. And then looking at who the businesses are, to what extent the community is involved in food and in what kind of ways. And what staple foods do we grow around the city? What might be possible? What comes in? So that was the context for that research. And it's really important that we understand the strengths and vulnerabilities. So collecting facts, trying to unravel how the one production affects processing, affects retail, affects wholesale, and they're all interlinked, and often decisions get made just about one bit and have unforeseen consequences for the other components, so it's quite important to take a holistic view at this. So a little bit about what happens in Bristol. Within Bristol itself, we've got 4,500 registered food businesses. This is all data from 2010-2011, but it's not massively changed. And it's interesting that 3/4 of those businesses are caterers. Of course, there are very big caterers and there are very tiny caterers, but they're the predominant business. Then come retail, manufacturing, processing and wholesale tend to be much larger. A lot of them are out at Avonmouth. Obviously, percentage-wise, doesn't really show up, but they're huge companies. And I'm going to focus on retail because we are talking about supermarkets here, and a little bit about what that 21% is made up of. So in trying to unravel who those retailers are, not all registered food retailers actually sell fresh food that you can cook a meal from, so we had to unravel that a bit. So only about 1/4 really sell items that you can go and buy and cook a meal with. I'm taking out the popcorn sellers and the crisps and the newspapers, but there's a lot of those registered as retailers. Within the retail, those percentages there, 7% supermarkets, 17% will be those independent food specialists, and then the vast majority corner shops, convenience stores, etc. Again, quite hard to unravel. There'll be some really great corner shops, some of you probably know some, and some less exciting ones probably don't sell that much food. And we did a count, it does look like there are about 140 independent food businesses. So I'll come back to that a little later on, but going back to supermarkets, it's really difficult to actually get figures. This was BBC Panorama data from a programme in 2010 that showed in Bristol, in 2004 there were 19 of the big 4 supermarkets, and by 2010 there were 76, so an increase of 57. And if we go on to the next slide, I've just done today a count using the store locator. And within 5 miles, and I've included the co-op because the co-op has kind of joined the big 4, though we might like the co-op slightly better because of a different business structure. But we're talking 86 supermarkets at least within 5 miles. And that 5 miles, just to give you an idea, Staple Hill, Cribs Causeway, it's sort of generally Bristol and its borders. If you go out a bit, you can see Tesco's just really ranks up the numbers there. The others they didn't all have data, but you can see by the way it's accumulating, Tesco is by far the most predominant around here. Thank you. For the Who Feeds Bristol report, we had a go at trying to understand what the implications of the retail data are, and it is really difficult, it's challenging, it's ongoing work, but comparing supermarkets with fresh food markets, the green dots aren't really very visible, so you might have a look in the book, but there's not very many of them, really, compared to the supermarkets. In fact, there's very, very few. You'll probably all know where the fresh food markets are. And there are a lot of large supermarkets and loads of little ones. So that was just trying to understand how they spatially relate. Going back to our 140 independent food retail businesses, these are the actual figures from 2011. So we've got 40 butchers. Not all of those will be sourcing locally, but we did a snapshot survey with these sorts of businesses, and it was certainly the meat sellers, the butchers, who had the most interest from their customers in local and tended to have the most contact with producers within the region. Most of those greengrocers buy directly from the wholesale market down in St Phillips. And obviously fish is tricky, we're a little bit inland here, but quite a few of the fishmongers will source fish from South Wales, Cornwall and Devon. But those just interesting numbers comparing the independents with the supermarkets. We also had a go at trying to understand what that fresh food provision looked like. So this is food being sold through supermarkets or other retailers that you could cook from scratch a meal with. Again, there's quite a lot of detail here, so I won't dwell on it. It's just to really let you know that we've started that analysis, and there's some ongoing analysis at the moment, looking at data that the council has with somebody from the University of Bristol.
Oh, look, there's Dave's Cottage. Look.
There they are.
Very proud of them.
So what's really interesting and great is that when we looked at DEFRA data on how much staple foods were produced within a 50-mile radius, we have a huge range of food here, probably more than some cities, really with the exception of pork and cereals. We've got a lot of farmers markets across the city region. They vary in size and they vary in regularity and numbers. We have got a lot of farmers markets. However, of the businesses that tell us that they source local, it was only 3% that we could find of registered business actually actively tell us they support local. So we've got a huge gap here, gap in knowledge, gap in communication. I've already mentioned the butchers, so we'll move on from that. And one of the issues is making local supply, regional supply visible. It's incredibly difficult. And this is in part highlighted within the wholesale, but I've included this